You wake up, get dressed, sit in traffic, stare at a screen for 8 hours, sit in traffic again, come home, sleep, repeat. Now here is the question nobody ever asks you directly. What is all of that worth? Not emotionally, not spiritually, in money. Cold, hard numbers. Let's say your salary is $50,000 a year. Work 40 years. That's $2 million in lifetime earnings. Sounds impressive, right? But after taxes, rent, food, car, subscriptions, and the life you had to spend to earn all of it, most people retire with less than $100,000 saved. Some retire with nothing. $2 million passed through their hands. And the system swallowed almost every cent. This video is not about working harder. You already work hard. This is about understanding something the Roman Empire understood 2,000 years ago, something that the financial system around you is designed to make sure you never figure out. Because here is the brutal truth. Your salary was never designed to make you free. It was designed to make you useful. Stay with me. By the end of this video, that sentence will change the way you see every paycheck you ever earn. Let's go back. Rome 100 AD. At the height of the Roman Empire, there were roughly 60 million people living under Roman rule. And historians estimate that nearly 30% of them were slaves. But that is not the part of the story they teach you in school. The part they don't teach you is this. The Romans had another system running alongside slavery. A system that was quieter, more elegant, more profitable. They called it the coloni. Coloni were free men. They weren't owned. They weren't in chains. They could walk around, eat meals with their families, call themselves citizens. But they were bound, legally, financially, contractually, to work a piece of land they would never own, for a landlord who would take the majority of everything they produced. They were free in name, trapped in practice. Pause. Sound familiar? Today we don't call it coloni. We call it a salary. A monthly payment for your time and labor, just enough to survive, rarely enough to escape. You work the land. Your employer keeps the harvest. And every month the cycle resets. The Romans figured out something profound. You don't need to own a person to control them. You just need to own the thing they need to survive. In ancient Rome, that thing was land. Today it's money. Specifically, the money you don't have yet. And this is the architecture of the trap most people spend their entire lives inside without ever seeing its walls. The Roman Empire wasn't just a military power. It was the greatest economic machine the ancient world had ever seen. And the men who ran it understood something about money that most people today still haven't grasped. There were two kinds of Romans at the top. The first kind earned income. They were lawyers, merchants, skilled craftsmen. Respected. Comfortable. But always running. Always needing the next job, the next contract, the next client to keep the money coming in. The second kind earned from assets. Senators. Landowners. Men who owned things that produced value while they slept. Their farms generated grain. Their insulae, apartment buildings, generated rent. Their investments in trade ships generated returns whether they showed up to work that day or not. One group sold their time. The other group owned the systems that made time irrelevant. And the Roman senator Cato the Elder, one of the wealthiest men in the Republic, said something that should stop every salary earner cold. He said the ideal man was one who could grow richer while he slept. Grow richer while you sleep. That was not a metaphor. That was his actual investment strategy. He owned land. He owned ships. He invested in the businesses of others. And every day he woke up, the system he had built was working, with or without him. Now here is the data that makes this ancient wisdom brutally modern. Average salary growth in the US over 40 years, roughly 3 times adjusted for inflation. Average S&P 500 return over the same period, roughly 10 times in real terms. A person who invested $10,000 in 1984 would have over $700,000 today. A person who kept it in a savings account would have roughly $26,000 today. The gap between those two numbers is not luck. It is the gap between selling your time and owning a piece of the system that buys other people's time. Cato understood this in the 2nd century BC. The question is, why don't you? Let me show you exactly how the trap works. Not in theory. Mechanically. There is a concept in economics called the velocity of money. It describes how quickly a single unit of currency moves through an economy, how many transactions it passes through before it stops moving. When you earn a salary, that money moves through your hands very fast. It hits your account. You pay rent. Your landlord pays their mortgage. The bank uses that mortgage payment to lend to someone else. Your money is gone within days. And what did you keep? Nothing. You kept your labor records. But when an asset earns income, when your money owns something, the dynamic completely reverses. The asset keeps generating. You keep accumulating. And over time, the gap between you and the person who only earns a salary compounds. Here is the number that should disturb you the most. In 2023, the Federal Reserve published data showing that the top 1% of Americans own more wealth than the entire bottom 90% combined. But here's what nobody talks about. The majority of that wealth is not in salaries. It is not even in business income. It is in assets, stocks, real estate, and private equity, things that generate returns while the owner does absolutely nothing. This is not a conspiracy. It is arithmetic. And the Roman Senate would have recognized it immediately. Now let's talk about why your salary specifically cannot be the answer. Here are 3 reasons, and I want you to really sit with each one. Reason 1, your salary has a ceiling. Your expenses don't. The average salary grows maybe 3 to 5% per year if you are performing well. But inflation, the silent tax on your purchasing power, runs at 3 to 4%. Which means in most years your real raise is almost zero. You feel like you're moving forward. Mathematically you're standing still. And your expenses? They don't follow salary logic. They follow lifestyle logic. Every raise you get, your spending adjusts to match it. Researchers call this lifestyle inflation. The Romans called it living in accordance with your station. Both are traps with different names. Reason 2, your salary stops the moment you stop. This is the terrifying mathematics of earned income. You get sick for 3 months, your salary stops. You lose your job, your salary stops. You die, your salary stops the same day. Every single dollar you will ever earn from a salary requires your active presence. You cannot scale it. You cannot clone yourself. You are the bottleneck. The Roman colony could not leave the land. Neither can you leave your desk, not without the income disappearing with you. Reason 3, the tax code was not written for salary earners. In the United States, salary income is taxed at rates between 22% and 37% for the middle class. But long-term capital gains, the money that assets make, are taxed at 0%, 15%, or 20%. Warren Buffett famously pointed out that he pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. This is not an accident. The tax code rewards ownership. It was written by people who own things. 3 ceilings. 3 traps. And your salary is operating inside all 3 of them simultaneously, every single day. So here is where most videos would pivot into a list of investments. 10 stocks to buy. 5 ETFs. A portfolio breakdown. I'm not going to do that yet. Because before any of those matters, something else has to happen first. You have to change who you think you are. The Roman distinction between the colony and the senator was not just financial. It was psychological. It was identity. The colony thought of themselves as workers. The senator thought of himself as an owner. And that single difference in self-perception determined every financial decision that followed. A worker asks, how do I earn more? An owner asks, what can I own that earns without me? These are not the same question. They lead to completely different lives. The problem is not that people lack money. The problem is that they think like employees in a world that rewards owners. Think about the last time you got a raise. What did you do with it? If you're honest, you probably spent most of it within a year. A nicer apartment. A better car. Subscriptions you now take for granted. The raise felt good for about 3 weeks and then it just became your new normal. This is not a character flaw. It is a programmed response. From the time you were a child, every message around you said, work, earn, spend. Work, earn, spend. The spending was the reward. The spending was the point. But ownership follows a different logic entirely. The owner delays. The owner deprives themselves today so that tomorrow, a piece of the world works for them. And the longer they do it, the less they have to do themselves. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, one of the most powerful men in human history, wrote in his private journal, The Meditations, that the greatest source of human suffering was desire for things outside of your control. Fame, approval, luxury. He called it chasing shadows. What he practiced instead was control over the self. Specifically, control over the impulse to consume. And I want to make this very practical because philosophy without action is just entertainment. Here is the identity shift in concrete terms. Starting today, every financial decision you make goes through one filter. Does this make me more of an owner or more of a consumer? That is it. That is the entire mental model. New iPhone. Consumer. Index fund contribution? Owner. Subscription service? Consumer. Dividend paying stock? Owner. You do not have to become a monk. You do not have to sacrifice everything. You just have to run every dollar through that one filter more often than you currently do. The Roman Empire was not built on ambition alone. It was built on systems. Roads that lasted 1,000 years. Aqueducts that served millions of people. Legal structures that governed commerce across 3 continents. The Romans were obsessed with building things that worked without constant attention. Your financial life should work the same way. Here is a framework I call the Roman 3 layers. It is built from the investment principles we've been discussing, structured the way the Romans would have structured anything. Foundation first, growth second, expansion third. Layer 1. The foundation, 20% of every dollar. Before anything else, before rent, before food, before any expense. 20% of every dollar you earn is redirected into your financial foundation. This is not savings in the traditional sense. This is non-negotiable territory. It does not negotiate with your lifestyle. It does not respond to emergencies. It is the bedrock. Split this into 2 halves. 10% goes into a high-yield account that you do not touch. This is your emergency reserve, your buffer against the unpredictable. The other 10% begins building your asset base. The Romans understood that a civilization with no reserve could not survive the first major shock. Your financial foundation is the same thing. Layer 2, the growth engine, 50% of your asset base. Once your foundation is established, your asset base begins working. The core of it, 50%, goes into ownership of the broad market. Index funds that track the S&P 500 total market ETFs, or global equity funds. Not individual stocks. Not hot tips. The whole market. Why the whole market? Because the Romans didn't build an empire by betting on one province. They built it by owning as many provinces as possible, diversifying their risks across geography, trade routes, and resources. Over the last century, the broad U.S. market has returned an average of roughly 10% per year. That means money doubles approximately every 7 years. Not because anyone was clever. Simply because they owned a piece of the machine. This is your growth engine. It runs in the background while you sleep, while you work, while you live your life. Layer 3, the expansion fund, 30% of your asset base. This is where Rome went from a city to an empire. 30% of your asset base is held as flexible capital, available for strategic opportunities, market corrections, real estate moments, a business investment. This money sits in short-term bonds or money market funds, earning 4 to 5%, waiting. The Roman generals did not attack every day. They waited. They positioned. And when the moment came, when the enemy was weak, when the timing was right, they moved decisively. During the 2020 market crash, the S&P 500 dropped 34% in 33 days. The people with cash ready, with an expansion fund, bought ownership in the entire U.S. economy at a 34% discount. By the end of that year, the market had fully recovered. By 2021, it had surged past all previous highs. Patience is not passivity. In Roman strategy and in financial strategy, patience is the weapon. 3 layers. Foundation, growth engine, expansion fund. Not complicated. Not glamorous. But powerful in the same way Roman architecture was powerful, because it was built to last. The Roman Empire lasted roughly 500 years in the West. 1,500 years if you count the Eastern continuation. And one of the primary reasons it lasted so long was compound accumulation. Of territory, of resources, of infrastructure that kept producing. Compound interest works on the same principle. It rewards time more than intelligence. More than income. More than luck. Here is the number that should end this conversation for you permanently. If you invest $500 per month starting at age 25, at a 9% annual return, you will have approximately $2.1 million by the time you are 65. If you wait until age 35 to start, just 10 years later, that same $500 per month at the same rate produces approximately $930,000. 10 years of delay cost you $1.2 million. Not because you made bad investments. Not because the market crashed. Simply because compound interest is time-dependent. It needs years the way fire needs oxygen. Take away the years and the flame never reaches full size. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Every month you wait, you are making a decision. Not a passive one, an active one. You are deciding that your present comfort is worth more than your future freedom. You are deciding to remain a colony. The Roman Senate did not build generational wealth by accident. They built it by understanding that the man who owns something will always outlast the man who only earns something. And then they acted on that understanding with every financial decision they made. You now have the same understanding. The question is the same one every Roman citizen faced when they saw the Senate's wealth and their own modest wages. Will you figure out how to own something? Or will you spend your life producing value for people who already do? That alarm clock will go off again tomorrow. And the day after. And the day after that. The only question worth asking is, each time it goes off, are you working for your money, or is your money finally working for you?